He was once voted one of the top pediatricians in the country and researched near-death experiences in children. He is also the head of the Institute for the Scientific Study of Consciousness, the ISSC, and published articles on NDEs, deathbed visions, and past life memories. He has also co-founded the Recidivism Prevention Group, and he also authored the New York Times bestsellers Closer to the Light and Where God Lives. It's been a year and a half since we last spoke on this show, but now he's back. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Melvin Morse. Dr. Melvin Morse, welcome back to the show. Um, it's been a year and a half, I think, since I last spoke to you on experiential realism. And today I'd like to talk about near-death experiences, mainly focus on that. And I have one of your NDEs here, which I posted on the Facebook groups I frequent and some of which I moderate. And this NDE is quite striking to me because it mentions a religious figure. And I'd like I'd like for us to discuss what your views or theories are on religious figures that show up in these NDEs. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah, I came across this NDE. I call it the Jesus on the Log NDE. That's how I called it on Facebook.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw you talk about this NDE case on YouTube, I believe. And then a few weeks later, I decided to post about it. So everything I say here is based on memory. And if I make any mistakes, feel free to correct me anyway. But yeah, I'm going to read this out and then feel free to comment on it. So basically, this is what I posted. Um, a little girl almost died in hospital. You'll recognize it. I can't recall the medical details, but she had a cardiac arrest during an operation, I think. She survived and had a story to tell. She was asked to draw what she saw and to explain, so she drew the OR, a bird's eye view of herself in the hospital bed, the team that operated on her, and the tools that we used. She even drew one of the doctors wearing a long hat similar to the mitre worn by bishops, a hat that is actually worn by the medical team leader, and a detail that she couldn't possibly know about through conventional means. She explained that she found herself floating near the ceiling and saw everything that took place in the OR. Everything indicated that what she experienced was not a hallucination and could be objectively verified by others. But then Dr. Morse, or your team, however it happened, asked her about the rustic scenery she drew just above the hospital environment, and this is where it gets weird. She drew grass, flowers, trees, a stream, some pebbles, and a few people. When Dr. Morse asked her to explain, she said it was heaven. And what is this? The doctor asked, and she pointed at some curved lines. This is the rainbow that lets me know who I am in heaven, she replied. And who are they? He asked, as he pointed at a couple with smiley faces. My uncle and aunt, they were happy to see me. Both had been deceased for years. But then the doctor noticed that she had drawn another figure sitting on a log, resembling a bearded man with long hair, wearing a robe and sandals. Who's this? Jesus, she replied. And she had also drawn a door next to this figure. Now, one might be tempted to interpret this as just a dream influenced by religious culture and upbringing. But then the girl continues. Jesus told me that I had to go back because my little brother will be born with a heart problem and my mummy will be very sad. I need to be there for my mummy, or something along those lines. Indeed, her mother was pregnant at the time, and months later she gave birth to a baby boy with a heart condition. It seems that the sister, through the Jesus on the log character, had a precognitive revelation ahead of time and certainly ahead of the medical diagnosis of her baby brother. So questions are raised about the veracity of Jesus. Perhaps it's an archetype that finds expression in the collective psyche of humankind. Maybe Jesus Christ is a bodhisattva that can manifest as a compassionate being in these experiences. After all, what the Jesus character communicated was also verified in time. So it would be a mistake to class the experience of heaven as hallucinatory. It is also possible that the girl was dealing with a higher consciousness, perhaps an aspect of the mind at large too complex for the human mind to comprehend. So it presents itself as a simplified image which points to its divine nature and simultaneously something that a child can begin to comprehend. Jesus Christ is good and works in your favor as well as the collective. Whatever the case, it seemed benign and spoke the truth. That divinity most likely resides in all of us, even if some seem to be completely blind to it. I suspect the deity is the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, that's how I wrote about it then. And ever since, I've been obsessing over it really. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on with reality. If we come up with cultural symbols to explain something which is beyond us. And if the girl was in touch with a higher consciousness and recognized some kind of benign nature and all knowing and all loving, and all the girl could do to try and describe or identify this higher consciousness was to say, oh, it was Jesus or something like that, because that's how she grew up, presumably in a Christian household. So, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts about these religious figures?
What a great topic. I've got a lot of answers for you. I mean, not really answers, but I have a lot more data for you that then you can, you know. But first, I want to point out this young girl actually nearly died from fulminant meningitis. She
Right.
didn't actually have an operation. Um, she was as close to death as you possibly could be and still survive. Arlindo,
That's phenomenal.
yeah, I feel so honored, but also, and grateful. But I also feel an obligation to tell these stories because these are patients that my team resuscitated. So I don't have to deal with reading medical records or trying to figure out, what is the truth of the situation or were they really near death or not. Um, this patient was resuscitated by my partner, and I love her drawing. She draws my partner as having his hands on her chest in perfect American Heart Association um,
Wow.
positioning. Uh, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that, an 8-year-old child is not going to be able to, confabulate or invent. That's obviously something she saw.
Yeah.
Um, I teach cardiac resuscitation at my hospital at the time, and I told my partner that he gets an A for cardiac resuscitation based on her drawing because it
Yeah.
was it showed that he was perfect. And then the detail of the hat. I mean, and that just happens to be the way our in the hubbub of resuscitation. We want the team leader to be immediately identified, so they wear a hat,
Hence the hat. Yeah.
and and she drew the hat exactly as it is. So they get all these little details correct. But
Yeah.
there's more to that story than so this family is Lutheran, um, and a very conventional, ordinary, sort of American Protestant beliefs. But the little girl says something about that door. She
Yeah.
said that behind that door were grandpas and grandmas and babies waiting to be born.
Wow.
Well, where does that come from? She's not indoctrinated in in reincarnation or any of that. That is not part of her religious beliefs.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the Jesus that she drew, uh, uh, I'll email you a picture of it when we're done. But
Oh, brilliant.
so your viewers can see it. But it looks like a jolly Santa Claus sitting on a log with a red hat.
Oh,
And I just love these. I love talking to children because they don't really invent or confabulate stuff.
that's right.
Like I said to her, so why is he wearing a hat, a red hat? And she just goes, I don't know. Whereas, an adult who, would then give you a lengthy explanation of what that meant and, that sort of thing. Whereas children just tell what they see and and then everything else they just shrug. I don't know. I don't know why. I
Yeah.
don't know.
They're quite honest, aren't they?
Yeah. It's very hard to dismiss this as a hallucination.
Yeah.
Remember, a hallucination is a distortion of reality. So, a hallucination is when our brain is not functioning properly. So our sensory input gets improperly mixed with our emotional states and our dreams and underlying unconscious symbols,
Yeah.
and then creates a hallucination.
That's
Um,
right.
so, but these children, their brains aren't functioning at all. They shouldn't be having any experience.
And
They
yet they
they
do.
shouldn't be having hallucinations or or anything. And yet they describe events that happen to them that they reference at the point of resuscitation.
Yeah.
And it's my after hearing dozens and dozens of these stories from children, I'm convinced that in fact the reality is that when we die, or in her case, go into coma, our brain stops functioning, and then at the point of death, consciousness returns. And in defiance of what modern neurology and neuroscience teaches us, that consciousness comes from the brain. But oddly enough, when the brain stops functioning at the last few minutes of life, consciousness returns. Now, this pattern we see again and again in children. Um, eh, it's interesting. They fit conventional neurology up until the point of the near death experience. What do I mean by that? In our study, what we did was we carefully compared children who survived cardiac arrest with similar children who were treated with the same drugs, were in the scary, you know, intensive care unit, intubated, ventilated. The average child
Yeah.
and parents, if their child is in the intensive care unit, they think their life, is going to end. That this is life threatening.
Yeah.
But in our study, we carefully compared children who cardiac arrest, very small chance of surviving, and we compared them to children who we know as medical professionals were unlikely to die. So the two groups were very similar in what they report, which is that when you have severe trauma, you lose your short-term memory.
You're right.
So, so you lose 6, 8 hours or so of your memory. So a typical child in the intensive care unit won't really even remember coming to the hospital.
Yeah.
They certainly don't remember the events in the hospital. They have this profound blank in their memory. And then when they wake up, their memories return, as but not the memories that they've lost. The time that they were unconscious, etc.
Yeah.
Children who have the near-death experience also have that same memory gap. So, for example, this girl here, she didn't remember going to the doctor's office. She didn't remember the doctor then urgently having her transported to Seattle Children's Hospital. None of those things. But
But
at the point of death that she clearly references, because she says that's the time she was resuscitated, and she draws pictures of herself being resuscitated. That's when consciousness returns. Yeah, I'll give you another example of similar. Uh, there is a young girl. We had to put a needle in her heart to restart her heart. So that's near death by any criteria. Same situation. The only when I asked her, so what do you remember about being in hospital? She said, I don't remember anything about being in the hospital. What I remember was being at home and I was eating one of these push up popsicles. And that's the last thing I remember. That's because she had a fulminant cardiac infection that caused her to then collapse.
yeah.
And she doesn't remember anything except she says to me, but I do remember when you asked the nurses for that crash cart thingy.
Oh, and she couldn't possibly have known about that because she was under.
Right.
Wow.
And that's the only memory that she has. And the entire ordeal, going to the hospital, being in the intensive care unit, coming back to consciousness, going home. She only remembers being at home and returning to home, except that one memory. Now, I haven't forgotten your question about religious figures, but I want to, I want your listeners to understand
Yeah.
we truly, from a scientific perspective, have shown that the near death experience occurs at the point of in other words, it's not a confabulation after the fact. So, what's a confabulation? Well, for example, severe alcoholics. If you say to them, "So, what'd you have for breakfast this morning?" Well, they can't remember, but they I know there's something about the human mind that just that hates a memory gap. So they'll just make something up. They'll
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, I had bacon and eggs like I always have." Um, that so when you understand confabulation and you've dealt with, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients who confabulate, for all sorts of various reasons, we as when we're not unconscious, we confabulate all the time. We're constantly making up our memories. People are always, they've done so many studies. They'll say, "Well, tell me about your 14th birthday party," and the person will go into great length and tell you what it's all about.
Yeah.
and then and then they ask their parents. uh, they didn't have a birthday party when they were 14. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, the child is actually taking two different birthday parties, one that happened to the brother and one that
Yeah.
happened to her when she was 7.
Yeah.
And splicing them together. So this idea that memories are somehow, tape recorders
Yeah.
of exact events of the past
It's
is
false.
incorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we make stuff up
That's
all the
why
time.
diaries are so useful. It's always good to write down experiences soon after they happen so that there's no chance of making a false reconstruction, or so we ward off
Exactly.
false memory syndrome. That's why I
So,
always write down my lucid dreams upon awakening,
well,
because I know if I don't, they'll be lost, and then you know they'll be
or
polluted with other
changed,
memories.
right?
Yeah,
Or dramatically changed.
yeah,
But when you talk with children who have near-death experiences, they don't have that flavor of confabulation. They'll just say, uh, "I saw a light, and it had a lot of good things in it."
wow,
And then I'll say, "Well, what was the light?" "I don't know." "Well, where'd the light come from?" "I don't know."
yeah, yeah,
"What were the good things?" "I don't know."
yeah. That's very honest.
so, so that's not confabulation, though.
Yeah,
So now there's a very important study that was done. You know, the studies in the military. In the United States military, they wanted to know how fast they can design fighter pilots to fly because they don't want fighter pilot, if an airplane to fly faster than the pilot can handle the G forces.
that's
They
right.
don't
Yeah,
want let's passing out
yeah,
while they're accelerating the plane.
yeah.
So this is a study was done by Jim Winery, who I've talked to him about this study many times. He did not do this study to learn about near death. Human mind can handle, the human brain can handle G forces.
Yeah,
So he puts these pilots in this giant centrifuge and whirls them at increasing speeds until finally they get to the point where theoretically blood has stopped flowing in their brain. And, they know that, that's when the experiment must stop.
yeah.
And the pilots go through, Jim Wintery and I have sat down on many occasions and discussed what his pilots described and what my children described, the children in our study described.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. The pilots lose consciousness, they lose bladder and bowel control. They often have seizures. I mean, again, these
Well,
are, military recruits that have to do this.
yeah.
And they have no memory of any of that. And then, just like children in the near death experiences, at the point of near death, right when they're about to stop their centrifuge runs, the pilots regain consciousness and describe similar things out of body experiences, seeing lights, um, seeing religious figures, uh, experiences of great peace, great serenity. Uh, uh,
Wow.
you know, Many of them would say, in spite of the seizures and the coma, they'd say that was one of the greatest experiences I ever had. I want to go in the centrifuge again.
Yeah.
Uh, by bringing them to the point of near death, it triggers this near death experience, which of course is profoundly life altering.
Yeah.
Um, one little girl once said to me, I said, so what did this all mean to you? This experience of that you had in the hospital. She said, I'm not that much afraid to die anymore because I know a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they are experiencing, this is something that happens to them when they die. So now I'm going to, one last comment, and then I'm going to get on to the religious figures.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
So that was our original study at Seattle Children's Hospital. Is prospectively designed, which is the gold standard of clinical studies. In other words, we didn't ask people to tell us, in retrospect, what happened to you. You know, we didn't take volunteers into our study or anything like that. Instead, we took a group that survived cardiac arrest. We took another group that were strikingly similar in every way, except they weren't near death. And we compared those two groups carefully to see what was going on.
Wow. Huh.
So by doing that, we determined that the near-death experiences occurs at the point of death. And this has been followed up by Penn von Lummel's study of adults, very similar study published in the Lancet, the world's most prestigious medical journal.
Yeah.
So then all these other things. Well, was it a hallucination? Was it a neurochemicals in the brain? Was it this? Was it that? It happens when we die. And Arlindo, you and I could spend the same amount of energy people try to, to sort of, I don't know what they're trying to do. They're sort of trying to, I guess, talk away the near death experience. They're trying to talk themselves out of it being real. Well, we could have the exact same conversation about this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, isn't this all just neurochemicals in the brain?
Yeah.
How do you know this isn't just a dream,
Yeah.
Arlindo? How do you know I'm really real? Um,
Yeah.
how can you prove that I'm real?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, there's a whole philosophy called solipsism, in which they say that we sort of invent all of this in our
Yeah.
brain. You know,
It's all the
I you
figment of
know
our imagination.
I was a critical care doc, so I wasn't into philosophy. But these endless discussions of is the near death experience hallucination or neurochemical, blah, 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 that applies to all human experiences.
Yeah.
The key is that it happens when we die. And it has none of the flavor because hallucinations are distortions of reality.
Yeah.
These are not distortions of reality, these are accurate descriptions of reality with spiritual elements superimposed on top of it. So they don't even seem like uh, a guy named Dr. Schnapper at University of Maryland. He did a very interesting study in which he compared near-death experiences to other intensive care unit delusions and hallucinations.
Wow.
And he showed this point that I'm making to you very beautifully. That uh, the typical intensive care unit psychosis would be I wasn't in the intensive care unit at all. I was home having tea with my wife. What are you talking about? You know,
Yeah.
you know, or or monsters were trying to inject me with poisonous substances, trying to poison my brain. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, things like that really did happen, but that's a distortion of reality. That was actually doctors trying to help them. And then he looked at the near death experience and he pointed out that these are actually accurate descriptions.
Yeah.
Uh, they're not distortions at all,
Yeah.
with these spiritual elements superimposed on them.
Yeah.
All right. So here we have this Lutheran child, but she draws this picture of Jesus that looks like Santa Claus, and she tells us that grandpas and grandmas and babies are waiting to be born.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really match with her um, religious upbringing.
Yeah. Contrary to
And
what people say. Yeah, because people
right,
tend to say, oh, it's all influenced by religious upbringing. A Christian will see Jesus, a Muslim will see Prophet Muhammad, but they never pay attention to those details that NDE has
right,
mentioned, which contradict their religion. Like the girl saying, oh, there were several children waiting to be born, and that kind of belief, the belief in reincarnation, doesn't exist in certain Protestant denominations. So yeah,
right.
I find that very interesting.
Nor has she ever even heard of it before. We did this type of analysis with most of the children. Uh, for example, the first child I ever encountered was named Crystal Merslock, and she was a Mormon. Um, Her experience, she nearly drowned in a community swimming pool. She was underwater for 18 minutes. Um, but in the intensive care unit world, we know that you're not dead till you're warm and dead. So
Yeah.
fortunately for her, the water was very cold. Um, eh,
Yeah.
but her experience, again, the accurate descriptions of everything going on. I interviewed her after she was discharged from the hospital, and I said to her, well, Crystal, I don't think you know who I am, but I sure remember you. And she turns to her mother and she says, "Oh no, I saw you. That man put a tube in my nose, and I didn't like it." And
Yeah,
that was correct. I had trained at a institution where we were taught to intubate nasally. Whereas, if you look on TV, mostly intubation is, orally, through the mouth.
yeah,
I just happened to train differently, and she accurately described that.
yeah,
She described going into a CAT scan. She described conversations that the nurses had. Uh, a nurse talking about her cat,
yeah,
another nurse saying, uh, you know, uh, this is really bad.
yeah.
She heard me talking to my consulting physicians, asking them, what should I do next? All of it. So she's accurately describing reality. That's not a hallucination.
No, no.
And again, superimposed on that, she said that she crawled up this tunnel that seemed to be lined with what seemed to be bricks. She was met by a woman named Elizabeth who told her that she would help her. And then she took her into what she thought was heaven. Well, we talked to her parents. They're typical Mormons. They don't have brick lined tunnels going to heaven
Yeah,
as a feature of their religious teachings.
yeah,
Um, there was nobody named Elizabeth either in her life. There was no Saint Elizabeth. There was nobody that they could at least could think of, a grandma named Elizabeth who had died. So this woman named Elizabeth, completely idiosyncratic. Uh, no explanation for that at all. And plus, I said to the mom, I said, "So what did you tell her about, what happens when we die?" She said, "What we've taught her is that the soul is like your hand and the body is a glove, so that when you die, the glove comes off of, and then the hand, is your soul and,
yeah.
continues on." Well, there's none of that imagery in her description of her experience,
No.
nothing whatsoever. And she met people while she was in heaven that she said, Mark and Andy. And this was validated by the nurses who were at her bedside. When she recovered consciousness, uh, the first thing she said was, "Where are Mark and Andy?" Well, again, no Mark and Andy's in her life, no Mark and Andy's, none of that. So all these tiny details really add up that this is a real experience. I think it's intellectually lazy to just say, "Oh, well, she was Mormon, so, you know,
Yeah,
of course she said she was going to heaven."
yeah,
Well, that really doesn't do justice when you drill down on what actually happened to her. And again, that's why I feel I have an obligation to share these stories because,
yeah.
we had these are children. We talked to the children, we interviewed the parents, we got all these kinds of details.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these religious figures that show up in NDEs, they deserve serious scientific and philosophical investigation. We should consider them, take them very seriously because I think there's plenty of evidence to show that they're not just imagined or, hallucinated. They have some kind of reality. I mean, there's because especially in that story with the Jesus on a log that looked like Santa. There's an element of precognition, isn't there? Because
Yeah.
it seems like the religious figure predicted something about the future, and
And this is not unusual. I could tell you half a dozen other cases. Um, you know, does any one of those cases prove anything? Of course not. And I think that people who are struggling to understand, these experiences, they often seize on that. They'll say, "Well, that doesn't prove anything," or or that, but was somebody actually, did we actually look at how many children predicted, that their baby brother was going to be born with a hole in their heart? Maybe that was just some sort of coincidence, etc.
Yeah,
But my professor, I trained at Johns Hopkins. My professors used to say, resorting to coincidence is the sign of the lazy mind.
it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think the
We
tides are
try to,
turning now.
you know, so, I mean, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. You have to look at this whole picture. So we studied 26 children who survived cardiac arrest, and most of them simply described a light that had a lot of good things in it, a light that told me who I was and where I was to go, uh, a light. Many of them just say it was a light.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, but having any experience at all when uh, you know, their brains aren't functioning
yeah.
is remarkable. Sometimes this light appeared in other ways. One young girl, she was with her father. They were fishing in Lake Washington, which is in Seattle. And she got up and the way kids are. And then she started rocking the boat, and then she fell over. And her father and a friend, family friend, free dove down to try to find her body. And this was an overcast day, as many are in Seattle. And their visibility underwater was, 5, 10 feet.
I can imagine. Yeah,
And yet they state that they saw her body lit up by a light, and that's how they localized her, located her, and brought her to the surface.
wow.
They were so convinced that this was true that they rented scuba gear the next weekend and they went down to the bottom of the, as far as they could go down in Lake Washington because they wanted to see, well, maybe this was just some sort of, stray ray of light that, just for some reason,
Yeah,
happened to just, you know,
some kind of natural
hit a wall.
explanation. Yeah,
Yeah. And, but of course, when they went down, it was pitch darkness. They couldn't see anything. There
yeah,
weren't, in fact, beams of light coming down. So that's really the predominant thing that children describe as this light. It doesn't surprise me that the adults, they often do describe a light, but I mean, they'll assign it a religious connotation.
yeah,
But, I mean, I wrote the forward to Betty Eady. She's a Mormon. She had a near death experience. I wrote the
yeah.
forward to her book. And well, she was I was a pediatrician taking care of her grandchildren. And I mean, her near death experience goes on for 154 pages, whereas the average child's near death experience, can be summarized in a paragraph.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know, I just think that because they don't have all these preconceptions and they don't have that urge to confabulate or that urge to mindlessly fill memory gaps, that they are able to just say, I don't know. I don't know what that light was. I don't know
yeah,
what it was doing, etc.
yeah,
Um, so I think that's important to keep in mind.
yeah,
But I want to tell you
absolutely.
another story that I want to throw into your mix because I'm not going to tell you well, I'm not a philosopher. I
Far
can tell you
away.
these experiences are real, and I tell you that these experiences occur at the point of death. I mean, those are scientific findings in the year 2026. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I'm
Yeah,
not aware of anyone in the scientific or medical literature that disputes either of those conclusions. So, but all right, so this is a young man. Uh, he was digging a uh, ditch or a hole on the beach. And he dug and dug and dug such a huge hole that he got into it and the sides collapsed and he was buried in the sand.
Yeah.
And his experience is very interesting. He said that he then floated out of his body and he watched, the people digging the sand and, you know, retrieving his body. And he says that he was put into the ambulance
Ambulance.
and that he was connected to his body, but he wasn't necessarily even in the ambulance itself. It was sort of
Right.
like he was tethered to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, for people who think that these are just, I mean, obviously there's an element of cultural influence, but for people who think it's just cultural influence, I defy you to find another near-death experience in
Yeah.
which the person said, they were in the ambulance, but they were sort of sometimes on the top of the ambulance looking down through, the metal ceiling. Sometimes they're at their body. So,
Yeah.
anyway, so he goes off to the hospital. And same thing describes the PET scanner and all the CAT scanner, all that. And then he says that a wizard came to him. This wizard was dressed in white and told him, "Struggle and you shall live." Okay, so that was our first interview.
Yeah.
We interviewed him a couple of weeks after his resuscitation. Part of our study, we continued to interview them. We interviewed him several months later. And, we asked, it's basically the same questions again. We did not, by the way, we did not ask leading questions. We didn't
Yeah.
say,
You were
so
careful.
tell us about the light you saw. Our study was well designed. At Seattle Children's Hospital, we actually had a list of, pre-approved questions that we could ask.
Yeah.
All open-ended. What happened next? What do you remember about being in the ICU, etc. So I said to him again, I said, "So what do you remember about your experience?" And he said, "Well, after I was at the hospital, I met my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Right. The
And
story changed.
My Lord and Savior Jesus Christ told me that I would live." And I said to him, I said, "Well, when you told us this before, you had said it was a wizard." And he said, "Yes, that's true. But I have since learned that it was our Lord Jesus Christ."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no, I,
He probably had some
I
pressure from
just,
his religious family. Oh, he must have been Jesus, and then he went along with it, or something like that. Yeah.
I just think that, you know, I think that I don't think we can take that aspect of it very seriously. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, okay, let's back up and look at the neuroscience, Orlando.
Yeah.
Okay, I love your background,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we see the color red in your background.
Yeah.
Well, Orlando, you don't actually see the color red. You don't.
Right.
We as human beings don't see colors at all. We create colors in our brain from the sensory input that comes through our eyes and our various senses.
Right. Yeah.
So why do we all say, well, that was red? Because when we were 2 and 3 years old, our parents trained us. That's red.
That's
That's
red.
red. That's red. That's red.
Yeah.
So then we come to the acceptable definition of what is red. And frankly, numerous studies have shown that the wavelengths of light that you think are red are not necessarily the wavelengths of light that I see are red. And some people have more color, cones in their retina, so they can see hundreds of varieties of red, where other people with a different anatomy can only see dozens of variations of red.
Yeah.
We all call it red. But for these spiritual events,
The
we
colors are
don't
beyond.
have a common cultural dialogue or understanding of what it can be. Each one of us is left on our own to try to take this experience and explain it. The child trying to explain it to their parents. It's going to be some mishmash of what they actually perceived, what they thought they ought to perceive, what their parents heard them as perceiving,
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
And I just, I mean, I look at the other side of it. Christians report seeing Jesus. Muslims report seeing, Islamic religious figures. Um,
Yeah.
we did a study of near-death experiences in Japan. Invariably, they involve coming to the edge of a border, and then something is beyond. Well,
Right.
they're an island nation. Of course, they have, whereas studies of near-death experiences from Africa, they'll often describe things like that they were in a gourd, or they'll have very different
Yeah.
symbols,
It's almost
but
like they,
symbols
yeah.
drawn from their own culture. So people are looking at it the wrong way. It's not the culture is not creating the experience, but the culture is shaping how we report the experience.
Yeah. That's
And
beautifully put. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know, I and you know, spend some time with people who are intensely skeptical of these experiences, and you will really see they go through incredible intellectual gymnastics
Yeah. They tend
to
to be very
try to
dismissive.
explain away these experiences. And you just can't. In Jim Winery's study, what I mean, which is an experimental study inducing an end of life experience, uh, some of them said that they saw bumper cars as part of their experience, that being in an amusement park with bumper cars. But on further discussion with them, that was one of their most wonderful childhood memories, going to amusement parks and being on bumper cars.
Yeah.
That's something that was very comforting and loving to them. Uh, you know, so there's going to ultimately be a personal aspect to this. But I mean, it can't be, if every Christian sees Jesus, but every Buddhist sees a Buddhist religious figure, then obviously it's the cultural expression that's important.
Yeah.
Just like, I say the color red, I say the color blue, because you and I have already previously determined, you know, and that does, I'm using red because that's, one of the most basic sensory perceptions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean that, but then that just, what's a chair? Well, you and I have decided what a chair is. Uh, but but it's not, but the chair I'm sitting in now, has nothing, looks nothing like the chair that you're sitting in. We
Yeah.
both call it a chair because, that's what our cultural interpretation of that particular set of sensory impressions uh, is the best way to communicate that to each other. And
That's
those
right.
kinds of things are constantly being revised.
Yeah.
But with these very personal, spiritual um, experiences, we don't have that. And
No. It's like
it's
stepping
something
outside
really,
of Plato's cave and then returning and using the language of the people that have always dwelt inside the cave to try and describe something that those people have never seen. And they end up, it's almost like by translating it through our language, we lose much of what really happened. Am I right? So these experiences must be really
definitely.
rich. Yeah.
So let's look then. I want, uh, I know we're not done talking about religious figures, but there's something very important that I want your listeners to understand that when we hear what is a near death experience, again, we're simply hearing some sort of cultural distillation of some sort of common generalized experience. I, I, I don't want to ever sound critical of Raymond Moody because he's my brother-in-law.
Oh, is it? Oh, right.
Yeah, but I can tell you, Raymond and I have had the discussion I'm going to tell you right now all the time because I've told Raymond that he's done a disservice in many ways because he said, here are the 10 elements of the near death experience. Well, Raymond said, I never said anybody had all of those. I just said I tried to take all the ones I heard, and put, and I mean, so that sort of cataloging has to occur. But, um, I've been on book tours and I just, I love to talk about near death experiences. I love to hear people's experiences, etc.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon for people to say, I particularly enjoy engaging skeptics because I'm a skeptic. I never heard of these experiences before. I wasn't the first experience that 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 I ever heard. From that Crystal Bergerac. I was like, I really just wanted to know, how did she come to be in the swimming pool? Did someone pushed her in there? Did she have a seizure? I didn't really want to know all this stuff about heaven. And she saw the look on my face and she says, you'll see, Dr. Morse. Heaven's fun.
Yeah.
But all right. But here's what I'm trying to say. So I talked to a woman and she said to me, you're absolutely wrong that, because I nearly died. I was in a car accident and I nearly died. I had everything that you're describing and nothing happened to me. In fact, I was in total darkness. I thought that was really interesting. I thought to myself, but wait a minute. Because I know from, interviewing survivors of trauma and survivors of, coma and intensive care unit experiences without nearly dying, they don't have any memories. So why did she have any memory of this darkness?
Mm.
Uh, and I said, well, tell me more about this darkness. And she said, you know, it was the weirdest thing. I thought it was my father, and I thought he was hugging me. That
Yeah.
couldn't have been real. You know, and it wasn't a near death experience because I never heard of a near death experience like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your near death experience is going to be very personal to you.
Yeah.
You know, the hallmark of the near death experience is that we regain consciousness at the point of death, not did you go down the tunnel and into the light.
That's
I
right.
I I always have a nice joke with Raymond. See, the tunnel into the light only started, uh, in the 1950s, the 1960s. Prior to that, in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s, it was the silver cord, much like that young man that was buried in the beach. He
Yeah.
sort of
With the
described
ambulance.
a silver cord. So I always say to Reagan, I say, well, so your tunnel clearly swallowed the silver cord
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because nobody really describes the silver cord anymore. Um, the but
Yeah.
that's just
Oh,
what we can do. How else are we going to describe these
that's
experiences?
right. Yeah. I think that the silver cord was popularized by by the New Age movement. I remember people talking about,
Right.
oh, whenever you astral project, you're going to see a cord attached to your body, from the body to
Right.
the dream body or the spirit body. And that's not always the case. And many people who used to have out of body experiences, they used to say, no, we never see a silver cord or, um,
Like,
so there you go.
metaphors. But so, all right, just because it's a metaphor doesn't mean it's not real. I think that's unfortunately what's happened is that people go, oh, so you're saying it's a metaphor, so you're saying it's not real.
Yeah,
No, there's something. I think that you really have to understand neuroscience to understand the near death experience because almost everything that we experience as human beings is metaphor.
yeah,
It really is. That absolute reality we know.
yeah,
Well, we don't. I mean, I never forget one of my senior residents once told me. He said, "Well, half of what you think you know isn't true, but the problem is we don't know what it is right now. We'll
yeah.
only know 20 years from now." So when I say, what we know, I mean, what is the state of neuroscience in 2026? And people want to read more on this, a guy named David Eagleman wrote a brilliant book called Live Wire. And if you really want to understand the near death experience, I
David
suggest you
Eagleman.
read,
Yeah.
because he talks about. So, okay, so the nature of reality, according to physicists, is a timeless, spaceless electromagnetic field, energy, or as Einstein said, light. So when these children say, I saw a light when I died, yeah,
It's
I
like
mean,
everything's made of light.
they're
Yeah.
actually describing what the theoretical physicists tell us is reality.
Yeah.
All right. So what is this experience? What are you and I having? What we're having is we sample the electromagnetic reality that we're embedded in with all of our biological sensors. We convert all those into bioelectrical signals, which then go to our brain, and then our brain creates this reality. This is not controversial.
Yeah.
This is neuroscience 101 in 2026. That this is, in fact, an invented reality. So when people try to say, well, the near death experience is just a hallucination or an invented reality, well, you can't argue with that because
Yeah.
what's happening right now is I'm creating the image of you in my mind. And a lot of that is metaphor
Yeah.
because when we bring in all of this sensory information, it's not pure sensory information. Only about 70% of what you think is real actually comes from true electrical information from your biological sensors. It's then mingled with emotions, it's mingled with memories, and it's mingled with what you think you're supposed to see.
Yeah.
And neuroscientists today say that we create a model of reality in our brain. And then much of what we do all day long when we're walking around, etc., is we're constantly checking our internal model with reality with the sensory input that we're getting.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
an internal model of reality, uh, that's a metaphor. I mean, I don't know if metaphor is the right word because I think metaphor is probably some, literary term, etc.
Yeah.
But it's the concept. I mean, so we create this image of reality, and it has to do with our memories. It has to do with what we think we should see. It has to do with what we actually see. It has to do with our emotions.
Yeah.
And all of that gets blended together. And interestingly enough, it then gets processed. For example, your visual experience is endlessly processed from the time it goes in your eye, constantly being shaped, information thrown out. Uh, we take in, I'm just making these terms up, but because they're going to be revised every year anyway.
Yeah.
We typically take in billions of bits of information. Remember, we have trillions of neuronal connections in our brain. We're taking in billions of bits of information. And yet, the model of reality that we create is maybe 100,000 bits of information.
Yeah.
I mean, a fraction of, because we have shaped, we've discarded, we've, molded all of those in the process.
Yeah. We only take tend to take in what's relevant, don't we? To
So, so if we say, that's the bottom line. Real? Yes, they are as real as any other human experience. And the things that people push back about invariably are things which you could push back about any human experience.
yeah.
We could spend hours philosophically proving that you and I aren't really seeing each other, or that what I'm seeing in you is not what someone else sees in you.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't like people with beards. So if I have a if I don't like, I mean, that's the sad part about things like racism, etc. It would be wonderful if we could send people to, you know, weekend courses to train ourselves to not be racist.
Yeah. It
It's
would be great. Yeah.
intermingled in our sensory input.
Yeah.
Our perception of reality incorporates our opinions of, you know, uh,
Yeah.
other races, of men, of women, based on our own. If I've had a bad experience, I didn't get along with my first wife, that's going to change my very perception of, future romantic relationships.
Yeah. That's right.
So, so now, why am I saying all this stuff? Because this is what you've got to throw into your mix when you're trying to understand the spiritual aspects of the near-death experience.
Yeah.
That, that just as when you and I describe our mutually shared experiences, I don't spend all my time attacking you because your perception uh, of a woman may be based on uh, some wonderful experiences you had with your mother, and my perception of women might be based on uh, uh, misogynist concepts that I developed when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because we know that ultimately we're still sharing a shared experience. We're just distorting it according to our own culture and
That's
our own
right. Yeah.
internal.
Yeah.
When you understand that, then you see that what's going on with the near-death experience, it's no different, but
It's no
just to an
different. Yeah.
exaggerated extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, I, I don't, I don't know why that little girl thought that Jesus looked like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
my view, is going to be very different.
Yeah.
Of, but something has triggered the experience that then we're, as we do with all human experiences, struggling to understand, blending in all these other, so what I guess I'm saying is this idea that we directly perceive reality is wrong.
It's wrong. Yeah.
In fact, even time and space are inventions of our mind.
Yeah.
I know that is a very difficult.
No wonder
I,
Einstein spoke about time dilation and relativity. So time is really relative, isn't it? It depends
it,
on subjectivity.
I think it was Niels Bohr, but if not, it was one of them. Uh, said that if you are not totally blown away and confused by quantum physics, then you don't understand it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think Richard
Because
Feynman said something like that as well. If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't really understand it. Because most people tried to interpret it through the lens of Newtonian physics and Democritus, and it's all billiard balls, and there's nothing to it. But we can see that quantum theory
so,
paints a different picture, doesn't it? It's more like fields and ripples and vibrations, and yeah,
but so the issue of what are these spiritual, figures that come to us when we die? Let's shift gears and look at something a little easier to understand. Uh, Dead relatives frequently appear to people who have died.
yeah,
Um, and again, when you listen to children, you know these are not confabulations um,
you,
or
I can imagine.
inventions. One little girl, she drew me a picture of her grandmother, and her grandmother was sitting in a chair and was surrounded by a white light. And, then again, so why was she sitting there? I don't know. What was she doing? I don't
Oh,
know. Why was there a light around her? I don't know. So again, that's not the flavor of someone who's inventing a story.
yeah,
Uh, you know, when what I'm calling confabulation, you don't, confabulation is to fill in memory gaps.
yeah,
It doesn't
which is
involve
adult thing to
describing
do.
more.
Yeah.
You know, so but she says to me, I was just so shocked to see her because her grandmother had died. Um, and then she says to me, and then I was back. Meaning back in her body. I
Yeah.
said, what do you mean by you were back? And she goes, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
And,
For a child, it must be a bit confusing. Yeah.
so again, Arlindo, but that's not someone who's telling a fish story.
Yeah.
By a fish story, I mean, I caught a minnow, and by the time I'm finished discussing it, I caught a shark.
A shark.
Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's
Well
not
put.
the flavor of fish stories. That's not
Right.
the flavor of someone who's inventing a story. That's the flavor of someone who's genuinely had an experience that they can't hope to understand, at least with the cultural lenses that we have,
Yeah.
and is trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I just it's an obligation on my part. I really feel to share this with you
No,
because
absolutely.
you can't you can't understand this part of it unless you interview them for the first time and
Yeah.
unless this is a patient with fixed and dilated pupils.
Yeah.
By the way, they're not seeing anything, Orlando. We tape their eyes closed. I mean,
Wow.
we don't want dust and dirt, falling in their eye when when they don't have a blink response anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so this one boy, um, he says to me, as part of his near-death experience,
Yeah.
he says, "I was in the huge noodle.
A huge noodle.
Couldn't have been a noodle because noodles don't have rainbows in them."
Right.
Later, again, like the young man who then told us it was his Lord Jesus Christ who came to him. When I interviewed that boy again, 2 months later, oh, I was in a tunnel. Now I understand it was the tunnel.
Right.
Well, because that's the sort of the this is red, this is red, this is red effect, you
Yeah,
know. But hearing it for that very first time when he says it was a noodle tells us that he saw something.
yeah, yeah, that's
And the
right.
fact that he changes it to a tunnel, and then, as far as I'm aware, he's never used the noodle just that one time. He's never,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
he always says when I was in the tunnel,
yeah.
there was
It,
a rainbow in the tunnel.
yeah. It seems like he was trying to make sense of his own experience by looking for explanations. So from a noodle, it went to a tunnel. Yeah, a tunnel makes more sense. Uh, yeah, and actually, when I first started my lucid dreaming practice back in 2008, and I came across a book called Mind Games by Michael Powell, and it gave instructions on how to induce an out-of-body experience. I also, it was the first time I came across the work of Robert Monroe. And I remember Robert Monroe saying, try to induce an out-of-body experience, but whatever you experience, don't try to don't try too hard to analyze it or to describe it to yourself. Have no preconceived ideas about what you experience. Just describe exactly what you see and what you feel. Don't try to explain it. And that always stuck with me because I thought, right, every time I have a lucid dream or every time I have some kind of autoscopic experience and I see my body, I'm only going to describe that. I'm not going to say, oh, I was in my spirit body or my dream body and then I saw my physical body. I'm just going to say, oh, I was in a bedroom environment similar to my own. And when I looked at the bed in front of me, I saw the image of myself asleep. So that's more realistic and more, it's almost like he was advising people not to add too many things to it. Like you said, just be veridical as best as you can and try not to have preconceived ideas about what you experience. So don't
So,
say I saw God. If you're not sure, say I felt love and I saw a light or something like that. Yeah. And I think that's more honest, yeah.
well, you want to deconstruct it down to the level of sensory perception.
Yeah.
So, for example, the process of remote viewing, that you've described, what people do with remote viewing perfectly. Anything that's a noun, any, because nouns obviously are preconceptions, those are just discarded. The CIA remote viewers, in the United States military remote viewers, they're trained to do exactly what Robert Monroe told you. Is
Right.
that anything that's a noun, they just is
Discard.
discarded from their viewings. They try to just keep that sensory.
Yeah.
And so this I'm so glad you said that, because so people can understand that you're really describing ordinary perception. Cognitive neuroscientists, they love to show how if you have a preconception, then they can trick you into thinking that you saw it. you know
Yeah.
they'll show you a picture, and if you have a certain preconception, that it's an old woman, suddenly the picture looks like an old woman to you. If
Yeah.
they prompt you otherwise and give you the idea that you're going to see a young girl in the exact same picture with the exact same sensory input,
Yeah.
act you see a young girl.
Yeah.
So so but so we're anchoring your out of body experiences and your description of what you're seeing during these, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, paranormal states, or, altered states of consciousness, etc.
Yeah.
But they have the exact same perceptual principles that are contained in our ordinary perceptions.
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of the strongest arguments against this being a hallucination.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
me, what you just described is a subset of all human perception. So, uh, and people want to read more about this. Any number of the optical illusions that neuroscientists love to show. The one I told you about is a classic, which you can look at the same picture and it's an old lady, or you can look at the same picture and it's a young girl.
yeah.
And interestingly enough, once you get it in your mind, it's an old lady, it's extremely difficult to
To
then look
see
at it again
otherwise.
and see the young girl.
Yeah.
You know, but
Wow.
that's an important thing to understand when we're talking about spiritual perceptions. Uh, because I mean that's why Robert Monroe's Institute is telling you that, because they're warning you that once you've committed yourself to, oh, it's God, you know, and all the things that God mean to you,
Yeah. Then you start to color the experience.
right?
Yeah.
But then just as once you decide that picture's an old lady, really
It's an
hard
old
to see
lady.
the young girl in it.
Yeah.
And yet both are in there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
so that's,
It
you know,
this kind of reminds me what Henri Bergson, I think it was, the philosopher. It reminds me of what he said. The mind is only prepared, um, the mind only sees what it's prepared to comprehend. It's something like that, you know. So it's, yeah, people try to make sense of these experiences and they end up creating a narrative that satisfies their intellect somehow. And then they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I've managed to pin it down. But really, they're not really sure. The experience can be interpreted in a number of ways. So it's always best to describe exactly what they feel. Direct experience. I felt this, I saw this, and try to stick to that rather than add more things to it. But yeah, it can be very hard. It can be a challenge.
but, but people who are very experienced with out of body states, etc. I think the Soviet Union also has a very strong remote viewing program, but that's what they trained themselves to do. Exactly what you just said.
Yeah,
That instead of deciding ahead of time, oh, I think I'm going to see, drug smugglers in a tunnel, you know, or I'm going to see Saddam Hussein in a, like for example, when the military remote viewers found Saddam Hussein, they just described the sensories. They said it's a dark space. It's very contained. It's very quiet. It's claustrophobic. Just what you're saying, all the sensory. And then that sensory information was given to ordinary investigators who then said, hmm, where's there going to be a dark and, well, there's a little spider hidey hole.
yeah,
But if they had started, by saying, "Oh, I think he's in," I mean, there's any number of small contained, the things that they could have grafted onto it. But I want to go back to then the discussion of ordinary perception and neuroscience, because what you just described there is what I'm calling the mental model.
yeah,
This is absolutely correct. We do not directly perceive reality. We don't.
right.
Our eyes are not video cameras. Our ears are not microphones. That's a complete misunderstanding. Uh, our memories are not videotapes
Yeah,
or anything like that. Yeah, all of the research, I just want I'm going to go over it again because I just think that now that you have said that, it comes into sharper focus as to the meaning of it.
yeah,
We create a mental model of reality.
yeah,
Then we check reality to our mental model.
yeah,
How do we know this? This is not controversial. I'll tell you one way they know it. They make people wear glasses that invert reality. that flip reality upside down. After about a couple of weeks, they see reality normal again
Yeah.
because they've just reverted to their mental model. For example, neuroscientists have shown that when you go and you look at a painting, they carefully can, mm, mm, you know, see exactly where your eye hits that painting. You don't look at the whole painting.
Yeah.
You look at the 5, 10 points on the painting, and then from that, you decide what the painting is.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you don't decide. I mean, it happens,
It
in an
happens. Yeah.
instant. But it doesn't happen because you have carefully scanned that painting, etc. At all. You've seen one person's face, you've seen a blob of color over here, you look up there, you see something, you look down there, something,
Yeah.
you take all those 12, 14 data points, you compare them to what you internally think that you should be seeing, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
And they can fool the mind many, many times, and they can fool you into not seeing things that are present easily. I mean,
Wow.
that's not a difficult thing for neuroscientists to do.
Yeah.
So, these same principles that apply to our ordinary perception apply exactly to what you're learning from the Monroe Institute and then you're learning in your own, uh, lucid dreaming
Lucid
studies.
dreaming. Yeah. Yeah. I also
Now, I
came
gotta
across.
ask you a question. Oh,
Yeah.
go
I
on.
was going to say I also came across the work of Stephen LeBurge because he was he is or still is, was or still is a sleep researcher and lucid dreamer, and he used to say dreaming is perception unconstrained by sensory input, and perception is dreaming constrained by sensory input. And that's a very good way of putting it, isn't it?
That's a wonder. That's perfect. And so, you know, we started off discussing our near death experiences, hallucinations, and are this, that, the other. But you can tell it hasn't taken us very long to understand that the perceptual processes which allow us to have spiritual experiences are really no different than all of our perceptual processes.
Yeah.
But I got to ask you a question. So have you, um, do you do remote viewing with your lucid dreaming? Do you make precognitive efforts with your lucid dreaming?
I
What
have.
kinds of,
I actually have, not lately, but a few years ago, because I've had so many things happen in my life now. But at the start of my relationship, I was experimenting with lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, and I decided to visit a few people who have out-of-body experiences and then try to visit other people. And then I would wake up from these experiences and write down what I experienced, what I saw those people do, and then I would call them and I would tell them my experiences, and they would often confirm what I saw. But what I ended up concluding was usually when I call them telepathic OBEs. Whenever I successfully induced a telepathic OBE and I willed myself to see this other person, it seems like I would see what was on their minds at the time rather than the details of where they were physically. So for example, one of the times I visited a friend of mine across London from me, and I managed to, in terms of experience, I managed to separate from my body, and I thought to myself, right, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to will myself to go across London, and I imagined this vortex and a tunnel going all the way to his house, and then it really happened. It was like a dream space, and it really happened. I went through the tunnel, and I ended up collapsing. I saw like an image of his house from the top, the roof and everything, and I collapsed on it, and I entered, and then suddenly I was inside his house, and things appeared to be slightly altered, right? And I thought, oh, okay. And then I went to his bedroom, and his bedroom, the walls in his bedroom were blue. And I saw my friend sitting on the floor in the meditative position, and he had CDs all around him and a stereo, and he seemed to be meditating, and the walls were blue, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? And then suddenly the experience ended, and I woke up. I wrote everything down, and I called him, and I said to him, look, I was in your house. It was slightly altered, and I saw you in your bedroom, sitting in the meditative position, and you had CDs around you. And he said to me, oh my God, you know, I've been reading about Buddhism, I've been practicing meditation, and I've been thinking about getting rid of my possessions, including the CDs that I love so much. And then before I could say anything, he said to me, what color were my bedroom walls? And and I said to him, I've written everything down. You tell me what you think I saw. And he goes, I think you saw blue. And I said, yeah, that's right. And he goes, I'm gonna tell you now, the walls in my bedroom, they're not blue, right? I think it was magnolia. It's usually magnolia here in London. But I've been thinking about painting my walls blue. I want my bedroom walls to be blue. And I couldn't believe it. And then that's when I came up with the theory. So maybe every time I try induce these out of body experiences, and they turn out to be telepathic, maybe I'm traveling in mental space, and when I wish to visit the other person, I end up somehow accessing what's on their minds at the time. And if they happen to be in a particular location, a physical location, I will see that location in their minds, but slightly distorted, because we don't always remember precisely what our environment looks like. Sometimes it's distorted. Sometimes we don't even remember what our door handles look like. Sometimes we think, oh, they're round, but then we realize, oh no, actually they're bars, And I thought to myself, maybe I didn't really physically travel. Maybe there is no physicality, but it's all mental space. And I saw how he saw his own environment, and I managed to somehow access his own thoughts about Buddhism and getting rid of his CDs, even though at the time he wasn't really doing any of that, but he was thinking. And he told me, sometimes I meditate, sometimes, so
But this makes sense because wouldn't your consciousness be accessing his consciousness?
yeah, yeah, that's right.
I
So
mean,
it's almost
that,
like our
I mean that would be
consciousness
a
was one,
connection
it
with
became one, yeah.
because I mean because when you're out, what you're calling out of your body, well, I mean, we don't really have a body to be in,
Yeah,
and and we're all embedded in these electromagnetic fields. But it would be your consciousness would be contacting other people's consciousnesses.
that's right.
And some of the best paranormal research has shown, that telepathy and those kinds of things, are real. Um,
Yeah,
as we now there is a CIA remote viewer who then switched to dreaming,
right.
and he now does most of his work dreaming, and I just have forgotten his name. But when I email you the young girl's picture,
Yeah.
I'll send you. His
It's not
name will
Ingo
come to
Swan,
me.
is it? Is it Ingo
No,
Swan?
Ingo Swan's the one that developed the military
Oh, right,
remote
yeah.
viewing program. And but Ingo Swan said, "I am not teaching people to be psychic. I am teaching ordinary perception," which is correct. Um,
Yeah,
that I mean, you described beautifully their protocol. Their protocol involves uh, sort of dividing the mind into two.
Yeah.
Usually they have a mentor who helps them, or you know, uh, I guess a co worker. So one person's viewing, and then the other person's carefully separating the sensory perceptions from all of the nouns. And the Buddha did that. When the Buddha describes his original enlightenment, he said, I took it upon myself to separate my mind into its sensory perceptions. And then, he described, things,
Yeah.
places, people, etc. Because sensory perceptions
Yeah.
are our interface with, ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Nouns, all of those things, those are the
Yeah.
so in order for you to leave your mind, and enter into someone else's mind, you've got to leave all your nouns
Yeah.
and just focus on sensory perceptions.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, and that image of blue, I mean, just really, comes, uh, that so rings true to me.
Yeah.
Now, have you learned formal remote viewing, the the CIA protocol?
I haven't. I actually haven't because at the time I was reading Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe, and then I came across the work of uh, Tom Campbell, um, Thomas Campbell, I think his name is. I know there's another Campbell. Oh no, that's Joseph Campbell. But yeah, I looked into the work of Thomas Campbell, but the whole time I was just exploring with meditation, lucid dreaming. I also visited this girl I know on Facebook. Her name is Caitlin, and when I try, and I said to her, "Look, I'm going to try to see you, kind of like remote viewing. I'm going to try and see you to see what you're doing." And when I did that, I saw her wearing a grey coat and walking towards some kind of train station. And then I woke up. And when I told her this, she said, "How are you doing this?" Because I was wearing a grey coat on my first day of work, and I had to travel to a train station. So it's like, what the hell is going on? So it really freaks me out. Every time I've tried, I've only tried it a few times, but every time I've tried it, the people I've visited have always confirmed something to me. Even this guy I had an argument with, we didn't like each other. We had an argument online because he was very, not even skeptical. He was very dismissive of any of this stuff. He said, "Oh, why don't you try and visit me and see if the experience matches? Prove it to me. Prove it to me." So I
Yeah,
did that. I said, "Okay, look, I'm gonna." So basically, I look at a picture of their faces. I try to get a feel of their personality, even if it's online. I read their messages. I try to get a sense of their personality, and then I just relax my body. I'm in darkness. I try and get rid of my thoughts, and then I just focus on the person and a feel for the person. And then I thrust myself forwards towards that person, and then suddenly I see them in some kind of environment. And I did that with this person. And when I did this, I came upon this environment and I saw this person crying in the corner of a room, and someone was trying to hang themselves, like this girl was trying to hang themselves. So I didn't know what to make of this. So I woke up from this and I ended up getting online. He was a member of Astral Viewers. It's now a defunct website. And I said to him, "Look, I did this. I'm not some kind of guru or expert. I just employ these methods. I induce the experience, and then I tried to see you, and this is what I saw. I saw some girl trying to kill herself, trying to hang herself, and I saw you in the corner of a room crying, right?" And he said to me, and bearing in mind he didn't like me, but he said to me, "Oh well, it's must be some kind of coincidence. I've got some problems in my life and to do with suicide, but I'm not going to tell you anything. So he got really cross, and that's the last I heard of him. But I touched upon some kind of nerve. It's like he just couldn't deny it. So to me, every time I've done this, people always confirm something to me that was on their minds at the time. So yeah. And
Well, it's
I
really
searched for answers, and I come across the work of Michael Persinger, that perhaps there's some kind of mental entanglement and billions of brains within the geomagnetic fields. They're all connected, and sometimes the conditions are appropriate for some kind of mental entanglement. I don't know, yeah, but I've been searching for answers, and yeah, today
well,
I
boy,
think,
if you've read the work of Michael Persinger, because he developed the God helmet,
yeah, that's right,
that
yeah,
can replicate the experience, etc. You know, boy, I've got so many things I want to tell you, but let me just I because I have these pet peeves, and
yeah,
I always hear people, if we understood the brain better, we could understand the near-death experience or the types of things you're describing better.
yeah,
Because I
yeah,
always hear people talking. So, what is for those of your listeners who don't know, Michael Persinger, a neuroscientist, Laurentian University in Canada, um, he developed a helmet in which he could stimulate areas of the brain. This is important because prior to that, uh, Walter Penfield, the father of modern neurosurgery, he actually took stainless steel needles and stuck them in people's brains and would stimulate them and then ask them, what happened. But so what happened when he did that? You stimulate the motor area of your brain, somebody moved their arm. Uh, but when he stimulated these areas of the brain which permit out of body experiences, etc., people would say, "Oh God, I'm leaving my body." Or even more interestingly, they would say, "I'm half in and I'm half out." So Michael Persinger, uh, you know, has developed something less invasive in which he stimulated the brain with his helmet, and he would stimulate those areas of the brain, and people again, had out of body spiritual near death experiences. So somehow that means that led to people thinking, oh, well, then it's just in your brain. Oh, well, it must not be real because there's an area of your brain that, no, everything we experience is in our brain.
yeah,
There's there's a period, there's an area of our brain that allows us to move our hands. There's areas of our brain that, allow us to speak.
yeah,
But we know, going back to that book Livewire, which please, if you want to understand the near-death experience, read it. It's it's for the layperson. It's not a scientifically technical book.
yeah,
But in Livewire, he points out that even though we do have these sort of fixed areas, they can change.
yeah,
People have massive strokes that wipe out, certain areas of the brain. Other areas of the brain just pick up the slack.
yeah, yeah,
Other areas of the brain, so it's not. So there's something that is working through our brain.
yeah, yeah,
And obviously, just like a TV set, there's going to be some things that permit, the visual signal, some people things that permit the auditory signal. There's going to be something that integrates it into one coherent picture, etc. Uh,
yeah,
but uh, but just because just because there's a specific area of the brain which allows us to have spiritual experiences, in my mind, that validates that they're real.
yeah,
Um, you know, we uh, we we proposed in 2004 that the right temporal lobe is an area of the brain which is sort of an interface with the interconnected conscious reality. No, there's been no scientific, there's been no medical scientists or who have disagreed with that since that
yeah,
time. In fact, since that time, the only person that has really criticized it is a guy from another Canadian institution, in which he said, no, Morse is all wrong. It's not 5% of the brain, 30% of our brain
Right.
is hardwired for spiritual experiences. So that, so our brain, that we have such a huge areas that permit us to have spiritual experiences, to me is yet another piece of information that these things are real.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk to you about controlled remote viewing because it goes back to our original question
Yeah.
about the religious figures of near-death experiences.
Right.
All right. Okay, so Ingo Swann, as you brought up, in the United States, a physicist named Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann developed a protocol for remote viewing, and it works. Uh,
I'm
they
not surprised.
designed They designed it for military recruits. They actually thought they were going to have legions of psychic soldiers. However, the reason I'm saying that is because it's very cookbook. They envision that your ordinary military recruit could follow their protocol and could successfully remote view. And they're correct. They did do it.
Yeah.
So
It's like a real life Stranger Things, just like the program.
yeah,
Some
we
science fiction is
have a
science
hard
fact.
time. We have a very hard time as human beings believing scientific advances unless we know how they can occur. And that hasn't happened yet. We're sort of at a paradigm shift now. The materialistic worldview, that the brain creates consciousness. I mean, that's
That's right.
dead. There's not even a scientific definition of materialism anymore.
No.
So, I mean, everybody agrees that that's dead, but unfortunately, the new paradigm's not here. So it's hard for us. I'm just like, hand washing was well shown to decrease the mortality of, after surgeries and delivery of infants with mothers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But nobody bothered to do it until finally they could see germs in a microscope. So there's 20, 30 years of empirical evidence that washing your hands prevented infection.
It's useful.
But until we could actually document and understand the mechanism, nobody believed it. So that's what's happening today. But the reason I bring up Hal Puthoff was Hal Puthoff, as a physicist, first developed a a theoretical physicist theory for the brain being a read-write head of this electromagnetic reality.
Right.
So in other words, that our brain is a telescope. I mean, not a telescope, not a telescope,
Like a microscope or like a
yeah,
reducing valve
a
sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. It's an antenna, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and he developed this, and this is not a controversial, uh, theoretical quantum physics theory. I wouldn't say it's widely accepted, but it's certainly published in peer-reviewed journals,
Yeah.
and many other people have contributed to it.
Yeah.
But what Hal Puthoff then did was he said, "Okay, if my theory is correct, then people should be able to remote view. We should be able to prove this by accessing information that we have no other means of accessing." And so then he and Ingo Swann developed the controlled remote viewing protocol. Okay, I'll tell you to it real briefly because I want to get to why this is important to understand the spiritual aspects of near death experiences. What their protocol is, they will take, let's say, the Eiffel Tower, and they'll assign it a number. So now there's a cluster of information that is all the information about the Eiffel Tower, but an address has been added to it, a numerical address. That's another piece of information. So now they give that piece of information to the viewer. And what they've learned is that everything that the viewer comes up with that's sensory, tall, thin, metallic, you can hear, a windy sound. There's city noises, all of that type of information. There's curved elements to it. There's, you know, diagonal and horizontal crossing lines to it. All of that sensory information they keep, just like what you were talking about with the Monroe Institute. Everything that's a noun, they discard because the noun is then the brain trying to make a mental model of
Yeah,
the sensory information that's in there.
that's right.
Oh. What happens? This is why the CIA remote viewers, they usually work in teams, so they can have one person who's just sort of the intellectual, enforcing the protocol. Because invariably, the viewer will say, uh, I got it. It's a Seattle Space Needle. Aha! Yes, I've solved it. Because they've taken the same sensory information that describes the Eiffel Tower, but for whatever reason in their life, maybe they live in Seattle, maybe, you know, and then something very interesting happens. Once they decide, like you were saying, yeah, God, said such a beautiful description. I hope you're going to send me a copy of this because I want to remember what you said. I want to use that for a future paper because once they decide, oh, it's the Seattle Space Needle, then everything changes. Now, all of a sudden, they start hearing foghorns. They start seeing fairies. I mean, ferry boats, not, because there's a lot of ferry boats in Seattle.
Yeah,
They start hearing things that are associated with the Seattle Space Needle. So now they're inventing all of that and grafting it into their viewing. So the remote viewers have learned that once they get to that point of, you know, uh-oh, oops, you know, I, I've now uh, uh, erroneously solved the mystery, then they can't trust any of the information that they get.
yeah,
And, and their monitor then has to, tediously get them to backtrack. All right, you thought it was the Eiffel, the Space Needle. Let's just discard that. Let's forget about that. We're going to forget about all of the sensory impressions that you associated with the Space Needle. Let's go back to our
back.
original sensory information and see if we can get more information. And then maybe they'll get they'll hear people speaking French, or they'll start getting more clues as to what this really is.
Yeah,
Well, that directly addresses the issues that come up with a little girl, whatever's happening to her during her experience. Oh, it's Jesus sitting on a log. That's what it is. And once that happens, then there's this cascade of them grafting all the other information in. Or like, whatever it was that caused that young man to think it was a wizard. Oh, it's the Lord Jesus Christ.
Christ.
I
Yeah.
got it all wrong. My parents informed me that it's Christ that comes to you when you die. So now then he's adding lots of details to reinforce that point of view.
Yeah,
But that's what's important about the CIA remote viewing studies, or, I mean, not just, I mean, dozens and dozens of others. I, I reference them because they have this very cookbook formula that's then very easy to scientifically study.
yeah,
You know, we've shown very nicely uh, that well, they're they're at they're 70, 80% accurate.
Yeah,
But think about it. I mean, for them to be 1% accurate, because I mean, for those types of studies, I mean, at the end of the day, we can then say, oh, so what did we assign to that number? Oh, it was the Eiffel Tower.
yeah,
So now we can carefully compare what the person's reading was with the Eiffel Tower. We can see what they got right, we can see what they got wrong, and we can see why.
yeah,
Well, we don't have that benefit with whatever the spiritual uh, uh,
yeah.
entity or event is at the point of death.
That's right.
You
Yeah,
know, we don't know what that is, but we do know that it's something that if we can stick to the sensories, we're more likely to have a closer bead to what it is.
yeah,
And we also know that it's natural to once we have collapsed everything to say, oh, it's Jesus sitting on a log, well, then our mind is going to invent tons of stuff
yeah, yeah,
um, that fits with, with what we've decided it is.
yeah,
The reason I bring this up is that that's what often can throw people off who are intensely skeptical
yeah,
because they'll go, but wait a minute, you said that it was this, and then you said all that other stuff. And I can show how all that other stuff came right from your cultural conditioning. So you must have just made the whole stuff up.
yeah. No,
But when you really understand the process of perception, you understand it's a complex blend.
yeah,
And, and so we can, from science, hey, look, one person said it was a space needle. One person said it was some sort of tower in India. One person said it was the Tower of London, in England. But we know, because this was a controlled study, that it actually was the Eiffel Tower.
yeah,
And so then we can start to see, ah, here's what they got right. It's a tall, thin structure in the middle of a city, etc. And now we can see what they got wrong. Once they decided it was England, then they started putting a lot of details which they invented in their mind. And
yeah,
so the fact that people having near-death experiences invent a lot of stuff in their mind
yeah,
in an
yeah,
effort to make sense of it
yeah,
means precisely that it's a real experience
yeah.
because
That's
that's what
right.
we do with everything else.
It's like separating the wheat from the chaff, and at the same time making an effort to be epistemologically consistent. How much can we really claim to know? How much can we say about this experience? Well, let's stick to the facts. Let's stick to what was felt, what was seen, what was heard, and that's how much we can claim to know. And then from then onwards, let's see if it matches the reality that everyone can agree on, which is the objective reality. And sometimes, because I also had an experience which was apparently precognitive. Sometimes, so basically, it was one of those instances where I induced an out of body experience, right? I relaxed and I induced an out of body experience, and I managed to float out of my bedroom, went through the wall, and I found myself floating outside, right? And
Yeah,
I saw something happening outside. So basically, um, there was a vehicle parked. There were several vehicles, but there was this vehicle parked outside, and a bike came into the close where I was living at the time, right? So I've since moved from that place, but I saw this biker coming and speeding and turning around, and then he crashed into the vehicle. And then I saw one of my neighbors from door number one coming out, and he was really angry. And bearing in mind, I was just an observer, seeing everything from the top. And he comes out and he starts having a go at this biker, right? And then suddenly I woke up. And as soon as I woke up, I went downstairs, opened the front door to see if it was really happening. But the scenery outside, there was nothing going on, and there weren't as many cars parked in the close. So I thought, hold on a minute. Okay, maybe it was just a wake initiated lucid dream. Maybe it didn't really happen, right? But the thing is, 2 weeks later, right, I'd gone to work, came back from work, and then my wife said to me, "You're not going to believe this. A biker just came into our close and crashed into the neighbor's car, and they ended up calling the police." This was 2 weeks after my experience, and the thing is, I had everything written down. Honestly, Dr. Morse, I wrote everything down. As soon as it happened, I wrote everything down, and I said to my wife, "Look, read this." And from then on, I thought, this is beyond coincidence. It can't be that there are so many details to what I experienced which match the real events which happened 2 weeks later. So
But so when we understand the science, Arlindo, this actually makes sense. Because remember, there's these two realities. Again, this is physics 101, neuroscience 101. I'm not telling you anything that any other neuroscientist wouldn't agree with. They might not agree with all the rest of the stuff we're talking about.
yeah,
I'm not saying that, but we have this internal mental model of reality, and then we're embedded in this electromagnetic field, which time and space don't exist.
right.
So you've moved into a timeless realm by definition.
Somehow.
You, well, once you leave your so-called body, I mean, to me, the out-of-body experience is a metaphor. I mean,
That's
there's
right.
no body to to leave. I mean,
Yeah.
but
It's just a
you're
perception, isn't it?
shifting. You're shifting your consciousness. You're shifting into this sort of. I mean, the universe is made of information. So you're shifting into the informational universe in which time and space don't exist. So obviously, that's why in the informational universe, you can get information from across the world. You can get the universe, from anywhere. And I mean, it would be a whole nother show to go over
Yeah.
how physicists know that time and space don't exist, but they don't.
Yeah.
And that's been shown in any number of experimental studies. That,
I mean, doesn't quantum entanglement show that
well, and that's what I
at
was
the
about
smaller
to say.
scales, particles behave like time and space don't exist. Like there's
Yeah.
no time or no space between them. It's almost like they move simultaneously, don't they?
Okay, so I'll tell you, just for people who are going, what's he talking about? Time and space don't exist, blah, blah, blah. All right. The universe is made of information. That I mean, that's clear cut. So in this informational universe, this electromagnetic field is, that we're then sampling part of and creating our own reality. So how do we know this that space, time is well, let's just take space.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is quantum entanglement. All right, so here is the type of study that they do to show this. They take a laser beam of light that's been emitted from, I don't know, a single source, a quartz rock or something. It emits a single beam of light. So it has a single source. They then take it and they split it into two laser beams. Then they take one of the split beams of light and they change its color. So the other also changes its color.
Wow.
Wow. And the I've talked with studying near-death experience children just opens so many doors for me. I've talked to the um, the experimental physicists that do this, and they say it happens too quickly for information to be exchanged. That it's some sort of fundamental process that if you take something from a single source, split it into parts, the single source is the entanglement. We split it into parts, it's still entangled. So
Yeah.
when we alter one part, the other part also alters.
Right.
Well, Orlando, we all came from a single source. The Big Bang
The Big Bang,
was
yeah.
a single event. So we're all entangled.
Yeah.
And they've now shown that the process of entanglement, the study I showed you, just showed that entanglement, is a couple hundred feet. But they've now done studies that show entanglement. They've shown entanglement, for tens of thousands of miles and even light years.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that so that's the information that we know. So when you go into that realm, of course, I mean, it's only precognitive in the sense that when you return to your body,
Body,
your brain,
as it were. Yeah.
yeah, and your brain is what creates time, then it seems precognitive.
Yeah.
But you've gotten that information from a timeless, spaceless place
Yeah.
in which, there is, time. And that's why the CIA remote viewers, the hardest thing for them to do is to localize something in space
Yeah.
or to localize something in time.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I have, I'm fortunate that have worked with IRVA, which is the civilian face of the CIA, United States CIA remote viewing program. I've worked with them for years and years, done a number of studies with them, and looked at their and they are good at remote viewing. Absolutely. They can remote view and tell you the difference between a church in England and a church in France.
Hmm.
But they can't tell you when something's going to happen. That's the worst thing that they're at. They're spending all their time trying to figure out how to predict the results of horse racing or this, that, and the other. I, they, I once did a study in which they attempted to predict the results of horse races,
Yeah.
and they were all excited that they'd done a good job and everything. And I showed them that actually they were not any more successful than an excellent human handicapper.
Yeah.
I use Andrew Beyer, who's a well-known handicapper in the United States, and I said, so how can you say, I mean, you may just have been telepathically reading, Andrew Beyer, but
Yeah.
but for you to say that you can tell the future with remote viewing, you have to do better than a human handicapper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's doing it through reasoning and analysis of charts and
I,
past performance, blah blah
actually,
blah.
I was going to say, when people try to find out the lottery numbers and they try to read cards and stuff like that, is there a sense in which people have an expectation of what the information is going to look like? So for example, if they're trying to guess um, a hidden card, what the hidden card is, and and in their minds they expect the card to look like something. They expect to have a vision of the card, but actually the information which might turn out to be accurate might look completely different. Because I actually did an experiment with a card, right? With a deck of cards. So basically I shuffled a deck of cards as much as I could, and I put it on the side of my bed, right? And so I didn't know what the top card was. And I decided to induce an out-of-body experience. And again, I exited the body, and it was a somewhat inaccurate replica of my bedroom. And I decided to look at the card, right, with my dream body, right? So it's a metaphor. and I lifted the top card and I looked at it, and it was the seven of clubs, right? But then I lost lucidity. And when I lost lucidity, all of a sudden I was dreaming normally. So no lucidity. I was dreaming
Yeah.
normally, and I was observing a couple in love, and the woman had a crown, right? And this guy was had his arm around her, and she was like a queen. And I was observing them like it was very romantic. And then all of a sudden there was like a sort of like a heart encompassing them, and there was like a pink background, and I could see them, and there was some kind of story behind it, like some kind of romance. And then I woke up. But when I woke up, I remembered I remembered both the lucid dream and the non-lucid dream. And I thought, right, I saw the seven of clubs initially, right? And when I lifted the card, it was the Queen of Hearts. And I thought, okay, it doesn't match. But then I remembered, oh my God, when I lost lucidity, when suddenly I just let go and I was just absorbing this dream, it was a queen and there was a heart and there was some kind of romance going on. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, this seems to match the card in
Yeah.
reality, which is the Queen of Hearts. So and I only tried this once. So my question to you is it possible that sometimes we receive accurate information, but in unexpected ways? You know,
Right. That's the challenge of it. And it's very striking. The first time you saw the seven of clubs,
that's right.
that's very concrete. But the Queen of Hearts, you actually got information
Information.
first.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that information, that's what's accurate, is that
Yeah.
information.
And the
And
thing is,
trying to sort out.
and the thing is, right, when I looked at the card initially, when I was lucid and I looked at the card, I didn't see the seven of clubs straight away. I saw something like a superposition of numbers, and it kept on changing very rapidly, like, and I was like, what is it? What is it? What's it saying? And then suddenly it's settled on the seven of clubs. And it makes me think now, I wonder, is there some kind of did I experience some kind of quantum superposition of states, like, and I'm trying.
Absolutely. I mean, that seems, of course, because again, remember, you're moving into the quantum environment when you're having these experiences.
Yeah,
You're leaving a mental model and you're back in the informational universe that is information based.
yeah,
And then you're taking that information and, like children trying to figure out, who was that thing on a log,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
you're trying to, and, oh, now I got to just touch on another pet peeve that I have,
yep.
because you had said there was an inaccurate description of your own room.
That's right. Yeah,
So there's, I love skeptics. I spend all day long talking to a skeptic. But what I don't like are the pseudo skeptics,
yeah,
the people that are not intellectually rigorous in thinking about
yeah,
it. I hear this all the time. Like you alluded to it earlier, that I've had people all the time. They say, "Okay, so if you can remote view, come to my house and tell me everything about my house." Okay,
yep,
and so I've done that lots of times, and invariably get lots of stuff wrong and lots of stuff right.
yeah.
But if I asked you right now, Orlinda, I'm sorry, Orlindo,
It's all
to
right.
draw your own room, you can't believe how many mistakes you would make. You
Yeah,
were talking about that sort of earlier that, you can't really remember,
not
half
really.
of the things on your walls. So, so why do we expect perception during, these types of experiences to somehow be better than our ordinary perception?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's, to me, it's more validating that it is like ordinary perception.
Yeah.
That in fact it is. It's ordinary perception.
Yeah.
There's no difference between it. And
This is one of the things I quickly learned with lucid dreaming. Because if someone's not lucid and they're just dreaming, sometimes absurd things or inaccurate things or crazy plots can happen, and you just take it to be real. You think it's all happening, even if it's really crazy. If suddenly the world is overrun by I don't know, like vampires or zombies, you might really believe in the dream that, oh my God, it's really happening. It's the end of the world. It's some kind of zombie apocalypse. And then you wake up and you realize, oh, that was crazy. I can't believe I fell for it. But sometimes when I'm dreaming, and then suddenly I realize I'm dreaming, I suddenly have memories from waking life. And sometimes I remember things accurately from waking life. Say like it's my bedroom, and I remember where the TV is, or I remember that the color of the walls are blue, but sometimes I see them red. But in the dream, I'm lucid enough to be aware of that. I spot the anomalies. Sometimes it's like,
uh,
oh, hold on a minute, aha, that's not
you're really
supposed to be.
training,
Yeah,
you're training yourself
yeah,
to get better and better and better
that's
at
right.
this process. Because what a difficult process it is that you have to deconstruct your model of reality, get into the pure sensory realm, and then reconstruct something else, something
Yeah,
that you have no frame of reference.
that's right.
You know, the the training for control room viewing is easy because at the end of the day, we can say, oh, that number corresponded to the Eiffel Tower. But
Yeah,
you don't have that luxury with the kind of work that you're doing.
yeah. I,
Now,
I was going to say, in your experience and perhaps the people that you've worked with in the recidivism recidivism prevention group, and I know
yeah.
you've used meditation and stuff like that. Does it help? Does meditation help to quieten the noise so that your own noise, so that you begin to perceive something beyond or something, it helps you to expand your mind to reach other minds perhaps or more information in the universe rather than just your own creation, because I get this impression that so na nature has a creative principle. The universe is quantum states and it's always creating. And we're no different because it seems like we can also imagine things and we can also create our own dream worlds. So we also
Yeah.
have that creative principle. So in our personal space, we can create our own realities. But sometimes I get the sense that through meditation, I can try and um, dim my own creative principle, my own voice, my own narratives. I can say, okay, let's shh, let's let's quieten down and let's see what
Like,
more I can receive from out there. And sometimes I don't even need to have expectations. Sometimes I tell myself, just be patient with yourself, have no expectations, but just if the mind wanders, just bring it back to a point of focus. Sometimes it's like a lamp. I imagine a lamp. If my mind wanders, bring it back to a point of focus. As many times as it takes, and I tell myself, never get angry with myself. Be very patient. And sometimes when it's really quiet, it's like a shift. It's like a, and everything is blank. And then that's when things start coming to me. So I'm wondering if that's your experience or if the experience with other
absolutely.
people. Sometimes we have to
Most
quieten our monkey
definitely.
minds. Yeah.
Most of the people that I work with are heroin addicts. Unfortunately, in the United States, I would say three-fourths of the incarcerated individuals uh, are, well, they're either undiagnosed mental illness or they're heroin addicts that, need steel, and then,
It's
we're
harsh.
incarcerated for that.
Yeah.
But I, you know, I learned something about heroin addiction that I didn't understand. I always thought that if you took heroin, I've never taken heroin, but just I don't know. I thought, well, you take heroin to get high.
Yeah.
That if you, know, That's not what was it has been described to me by dozens of people. That instead, it's a sense of love. And they say invariably that they feel a sense of love that they've never felt before. That that it's more a sense of peace and security and love and invariably these are men that have never had that.
Yeah,
They didn't have the unconditional love that that most of us have in the first couple of years of life. They've never. So it's not really. I think I get the idea that things like cocaine and alcohol. You have that more sense of being high, but
yeah,
heroin addiction is a sense of security and love, and that's what you get from meditation. And I cannot tell you. I would say of the men that I've taught meditation, uh, only a few go back to being heroin addicts and recidivism. Go back into prison.
so it really works.
Which oh, absolutely. In the United States, uh, once you're in the prison system, uh, you know, once you're released, you got a 75% chance within 3 years of going back in.
Yeah,
And yet, the men I teach meditation to, uh, uh, much fewer. Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say it's a universal cure by any means, but it's certainly not unusual to,
yeah,
that I get that same thing that I got from heroin through meditation.
yeah,
That's not because you said it so brilliantly that because now they're contacting something outside themselves, and we all have a connection with this universal sense of unconditional love. We do. We
yeah,
all have a connection with the divine. That's why it's important to understand that when we say that Mario Beauregard is a guy at Canada who said that it's not a spiritual spot, it's not a God spot, it's a God brain.
yeah,
So when you hear that 30% of our brain is dedicated to perceiving the divine, that tells us that instead of having to take heroin, which can stimulate that same area of the brain, etc., we can learn to stimulate that area of the brain through meditation,
yeah,
and we can use our brain the way it's supposed to be used.
yeah,
Instead of dismissing it as, oh, it's only in your brain, instead saying, wow, we have an astonishing tool in our brain that allows us to connect with God.
yeah, 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 yeah. I actually had not too long ago. So I think it was at the start of this year, really. I had a kind of like a semi-religious experience. So basically, I went to my local pharmacy to get something for my wife, and then on the way home, there was traffic, and which was unusual for the road I was traveling in, and I was cycling, and I was wondering why is there so much traffic, and this is really weird, right? So this massive bumblebee bumped into my eye and I had to stop. This never happened. It's the first time it happened to me. A massive bumblebee just bumped into my eye, so I stopped. And when I looked up, I saw uh, a car parked across the road, so stopping the flow of traffic, and then there was a white van on the other side, and um, so two men were arguing and calling each other names, and one of them was about to the one from the car was going to hit the one in the van, and the one in the van was struggling to open his door and saying, "Yeah, yeah, come on," like that. And I stopped, and I had a choice. I realized I had a choice, right? Um, Something was telling me to intervene somehow, like I should intervene. I was compelled to intervene. But another side of me was saying, I don't know these men. I could just cycle on home. I don't know them, but somehow something was saying, no, you have to intervene, you have to intervene. It was like a feeling. So I ended up getting off my bicycle and I went up to them and I said, look, guys, calm down. I got them to breathe and they actually stopped and they started breathing. And but they were also arguing at the same time, oh, you're not supposed to be parked like that, you know. So I said to the guy in the van, look, just let it go. You don't know what this guy has been through. Just forget the whole thing and drive off, right? So he was calm enough to drive off. And the other guy shook my hand. He goes, oh, thanks for dealing with that. Oh, I can't believe I had to deal with that, blah, blah. But there's a relief inside me. And so the other guy drove off as well, and the traffic started flowing. And then on the way home, I was asking myself, why did I intervene? Was it to make myself feel better, or I could have just, I had the choice. I had the choice to just go home, to ignore the whole situation. And then my mind, as I was cycling, was flooded with a terrifying answer. I can't even begin to describe. This I was flooded with all these possibilities of if I hadn't intervened, it would have created this terrible ripple effect that would have affected so many people. The families of the men would have suffered so much. Someone could have ended up in hospital or the morgue, and it would have been such a terrible thing for mankind in that instant. It would have rippled out. And
Yeah.
I felt hurt. I thought this would have been so terrible. And then a sense of relief, like, I'm so glad I did what I did. I had the choice. Nothing compelled me. I had the choice to cycle onwards. But then I thought to myself, if I hadn't intervened, it would have weighed on my conscience terribly. And then after that, because I had to interview John Buchanan, and he's into Whiteheadian metaphysics, and I don't agree with all of it completely because I know it's very naturalistic, and I tend to have a more of a Neoplatonic view of reality anyway, but there's something that caught my attention in his book, which, funnily enough, seemed to match my experience, or my experience seemed to agree with it. It's the bit where he was talking about. Um, the three natures of God. I can't remember them, but he basically said, according to Whitehead, he said God is um, gently persuasive but not coercive. Is like a perfect father. He doesn't force you. He gives you free will, but like a good father, even though he gives you the choice, he tries to persuade you to do the right thing. So it's almost like it's like he's our conscience. And
Yeah.
I can't stop thinking about that. It
So
gives a religious dimension to it. So yeah,
I think so that, you know, I think then the obvious question is, how do we know when something is coming from God? And I'm using God as a, the way children use God, I'm not getting into,
yeah,
religion. And how do we know when something is just coming from ourselves? And invariably, all the things that you described are the hallmarks of something that comes from God. The gently, the gently coercion, the the sense of peace, the sense of knowing. When things are fear-based,
yeah,
when we're frightened, when we're angry, those types of intuitions, uh, you know, that's a, that's the kind of thing that, has you invest your life savings on a stock that's going to, immediately go down. You know,
yeah,
those are
yeah,
fear-based decisions, and you can spend some time understanding the difference. It's
yeah,
not. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it can be, that there is a difference between it. Because that's what people, obviously ask, well, how do you know? Maybe you're just kidding yourself.
yeah,
Maybe you just invented all that stuff up. It's
yeah. It's almost
Here's
like I find myself in a Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge a situation. Like, he experiences the dreams of the past, present, and future. Is accompanied by spirits, and then when he wakes up, he kind of has a moment of doubt. He says to himself, "Oh, maybe it was just a dream. I can go back to my old ways." And then suddenly he stops and he goes, "Hold on a minute. Even if it was just a dream, he taught me something." And then he decides to be a better person. And I think that's what matters in the end, really. And I don't know what that experience was, but I think it was valuable. Like it told me something. It's like we should listen to it. Some kind of intuition that we should listen to it, or it was just the right thing to do, you know. Um, I think I can't really call. I used to be a staunch materialist and an atheist before, but I can't really describe myself as being that anymore. I can be agnostic or an atheist in regards to concepts of God that people might come up with, which I think, oh, no, that doesn't really resonate with me. But I must say that I can't really say God doesn't exist. I think God is to me, it has to be some kind of perfect being, but not perfect as in it's absolutely perfect. I don't know how to describe it, but like love, and you can't help but worship love, and at the same time is in us and everywhere, and it's consciousness itself,
they
and
all
it's
say,
the being of all beings.
all
Yeah,
gonna meet it. When we die, we're gonna meet that love. Well, Arlinda, we're almost 2.5 hours into this.
yeah. I
I
don't
got
mean
to
to
take
keep
my
you any
daughter
longer. I'll
I want
send
to
you a
take,
link.
but but I have some things I just want to share with your listeners. I really do. That
Yeah,
just come to because the themes that I've heard again and again is that we are connected with the divine. Hard to know how, and it's hard to know what's coming from the divine and what's coming from our own fears and preoccupations and expectations, etc. But it can be done. And what you were saying through meditation, I think, is one of the best ways of learning to listen to the noise. And,
absolutely.
for those who are learning to meditate, don't try to quiet your mind. In fact, the masters of meditation, the ancient Buddhists, always said at first, your mind will be screaming. You're gonna hear more than you've ever heard
Yeah,
because you're paying attention to the first time. So you're gonna hear all the noise because you're not gonna know how to discriminate and how to get past the noise until you hear it all,
so true. Yeah,
until you get to that quiet place. And then once you're in that quiet place, true understandings and intuitions come to us. They're just, we're here. Well, I think it's a scientific statement to say that we are here in this reality to learn lessons of love.
yeah,
Why do I say that's a scientific? That sounds philosophical, but because the research on near-death experiences is so solid.
yeah,
The research on near-death experiences is people who people who say that science disputes the spirituality aren't familiar with the science. I mean, that's
yeah,
just all there's to
yeah,
it. So that near-death experiences are clearly real in the sense, like we were talking about earlier, they're as real as any other human experience.
yeah,
And the overriding message of them is that we're here to learn lessons of love.
yeah,
So these experiences are real. These are people who've come to the edge of life. Their brains are no longer functioning, so they're freed into the conscious informational universe, and they come back with information that we're here to learn lessons of love. Well, I think that that can
I
be,
think that sounds true.
the scientific pinnings of that are so strong that I think that we can accept that conclusion. And
Yeah.
once you start to accept that conclusion, then you start to reinterpret your life differently. And I was telling you earlier, I love to work with skeptics because real skeptics. If they're pseudo skeptics, then I point out to them that it's just, you know, it's intellectual laziness at this point.
Yeah,
I get it that it's very hard to believe something that, that we don't know what the precise mechanism is.
that's right.
But Popular Mechanics, which is a, you know, which is a magazine in the United States, devoted to tools and, I mean, that's a very mainstream magazine, is every month or two having articles on universal consciousness.
Yeah,
So certainly the framework of how the near death experience and how the experiences that you're having with lucid dreaming, etc. Certainly that framework is there. And if magazines like Popular Science or Popular Mechanics are publishing articles on it and their readers are reading it, then at least I think we have a glimmer of how this could be. There's some sort of universal consciousness
yeah,
in an informational universe that we can enter into.
yeah, yeah. And I was going to say, I
So,
mean, listening to all the NDE accounts and love seems to be mentioned a lot, and there are so many people describing heavenly realms, and the thing is, just because it sounds too good to be true doesn't mean it's false. I mean, it's because so many skeptics they fall into that trap of not even
yeah,
skeptics, they're pseudo skeptics, and they're very
yeah,
dismissive, and they just think, oh, this just sounds like a fantasy. It just sounds too good to be true.
right.
Well, they shouldn't reject it. I don't think it's a good reason to reject something just because it sounds too good to be true. Maybe reality is really like that. Maybe,
Arlindo, when you scratch the surface, it's not too good to be true. This is a brutal life. It's
yeah,
easy to say, oh, we're here to learn lessons of love.
yeah,
Sure, that means that your child dying in a horrible car accident is some sort of lesson of love. That means that the horrors of Gaza are some sort of lesson of love.
yeah,
That means, I mean, that means the struggles that we have day in and day out.
yeah,
But I can tell you, in working with the incarcerated, when I help them to reinterpret their lives as lessons of love, it can be very transformational.
yeah,
But I would not say it's too good to be true. And so
yeah.
they need to look about and sincere skeptics, in my opinion, are floundering on this issue of what is a spiritual experience, because invariably they've had spiritual experiences,
Right.
and then they look around and they're not reinforced in any way, and their spiritual experience is not exactly like someone else's experience. I mean, if I look at the Seattle Space Needle and you look at it, we're going to basically see the same thing.
Yeah.
But, when I interact with this loving God, whatever it is, when I die, if my wife has passed before me, my wife will be there to greet me. When you die, my wife is not going to be there to greet you.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
can be confusing to people. That, oh, well, it must not be real then, you know, uh, because their heaven was different than my heaven. It's all the same heaven. We just we didn't go through that process of, you know, endlessly. That's red. That's red. That's red. That's red.
Yeah.
That's why we all agree something's red. We spend a lot of time learning, and we've not done that with spiritual issues. So we've we've got to stop with this business of you know we got to stop with the wow and get on to the how.
That's right. That's
We
right. Yeah. No, that's very well
you know
put, actually. And this
mm,
reality is certainly a school. And it can be very
Yeah,
harsh. I mean, depending on who's observing it, who's experiencing it, and what they're experiencing. But yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes it's funny, but sometimes harsh events can humble people. And I wonder if that's exactly what they need, because people can be stubborn. But
yeah.
yeah, it's also one big mystery, isn't it? I mean, we're trying to figure everything out with our
Every
narrowed
every religion,
perspectives.
every major religion teaches us that suffering is one way to get to God.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
anyway, I do have to go, Arlindo, but I've got two things for you. I'm gonna send you the picture, the young gal we talked about earlier. I've got the name of the CIA remote viewer who then switched to lucid dreaming. So I know you'd love to read his books. But
Yeah,
also, I'd like to teach you the formal CIA remote viewing protocol.
yeah. I think I would be very
Okay?
much up for that because
I can teach you by Zoom. It'll take an afternoon, but the difference is that now we're looking at a target that we then at the end of the session can say, oh, here's the target. So would we get right? Would we get wrong?
yeah,
You know,
that sounds like
and
fun.
and, and believe me, we want to know when our intuitions are wrong. You
Yeah,
know, that's one of the hardest things that people have when they learn to remote view. They so desperately want to be able to do it. Don't feel that way. Actually, it's much better to learn what you missed, what you're wrong about. So you can
yeah,
start to learn what perceptions you have, which are totally off base, and you can learn the unique flavor of those.
yeah,
But I really would like to teach because that will then elevate your lucid dreaming game
yeah,
because you'll start to learn how is it for you. Like for some people, the thought they have is the correct one.
right.
They have
The
the correct
first one, yeah,
one. They quickly go overboard and come up with two or three things that are wrong.
yeah,
And the only way you know that is to, at the end of the day, then say, well, it was the Eiffel Tower. So would you get right? Would you get wrong? And how did it feel, you
yeah.
know, when you were right? And how did it feel when you were wrong?
That's right. Yeah,
What's your style? Did you think it was the Eiffel Tower and then discard it and move on to something else? Or did it take you, oh, I thought it was a Space Needle. Then I thought it was this. Now I know it was the Eiffel Tower. And
yeah.
you'll learn, how that feels. So I just want to offer that to you. I love to teach people to remote view.
No, definitely. We'll keep the lines of communication open, and yeah,
Oh,
no
absolutely.
worries.
This just been such a joy. I learned so much from talking with you, Orlando.
Yeah, likewise.
Really,
And thanks for joining me today. And I'll send you a link.
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. I won't be on. I'm going with my daughter for the rest of the day, but I'll email you tomorrow with all
Oh, no
these things we've
problem. Thank
talked
you very much. I'll look forward
about.
to it.
Okay. You bet. All
Have a good
righty.
day, yeah?
Send me a link. Let me know when it's going to be on the air.
Will do.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. Bye bye
Cheers.
now.
Thank you. Bye.